It's pretty obvious. COVID is everywhere right now. And we knew, thanks to your questions, that the state's daily case totals were an undercount. But we didn't know they could be this far under.
Could potentially be as much as few as 1 in 10 cases that we're actually being able to diagnose.
And after we learned Legacy Health is letting medical staff work while sick with COVID, we wondered, are other hospitals around here doing this too? So we asked. Plus, does a 20-foot sculpture of people surrounded by flames seem like a good way to honor wildfire victims? A lot of people in Southern Oregon say absolutely not.
It is not how you bring healing to a group of people who have experienced great loss.
Here's the story.
I'm Maggie Vespa. Welcome to The Story on this Friday night. We want to actually start by addressing something off the top that we're getting a lot of questions about, a lot of emails and questions on social media. It's this meme showing a police officer, or at least someone in tactical gear, appearing to beat a man. And the wording starts off, "And the Lord said, woe be unto you, dirty hippie." It goes on. This meme was born in the far-right extremist world, but it made its way into a presentation intended to train Portland police officers. The city says they believe that happened back in 2018. It surfaced now because of a lawsuit against Portland police tied to the 2020 protests. A lot of people online believe the meme is indeed mocking police violence toward protesters. And today, Portland's Mayor Ted Wheeler apologized for that meme. He says he's disgusted. The chief of police said the meme is, quote, contrary to PPB's values, and added an internal affairs investigation is underway. In the meantime, our newsroom is digging into this. We have more now at KGW.com, and we'll also dive into what we know on Monday. In the meantime, absolutely send your questions and your comments to The Story at KGW.com, or use that hashtag, TheStoryKGW. Let's get started. All right, now on to our big story. Tonight, we are answering as many of your COVID questions as we can, because we know you have a lot during this latest surge. So let's start things off tonight with our own Pat Doris.
Let's get right to the questions. Judy says, I would love to know what the true COVID numbers might really be. My husband has tested positive, and I'm sure I have it too. Neither of us have gone in. He tested at work. So my question, how much higher might the numbers be given the shortage demand for testing and people just isolating without reporting? Excellent question, Judy. You know, I just checked the numbers, and it's 8,672 is what the state's reporting, but your point is very well taken. The number is probably higher, probably much higher. In fact, the Oregon Health Authority director talked about that on Thursday during a news conference. Here's what he had to say about your question.
We've known throughout the pandemic that we don't identify every case that's out there. It's always been some kind of a percentage for a variety of reasons. People are asymptomatic, people are mildly symptomatic and don't test, or for whatever reason choose not to at different times, including right now. It's been difficult to find a test. You know, we've probably done as well as finding perhaps 1 in 4, 1 in 3 cases. Right now we're doing not nearly that well. It could potentially be as much as few as 1 in 10 cases that we're actually being able to diagnose.
So hopefully that helps. 10 times higher it might be. That's a lot of people. Marlon wants to know, is COVID really as bad as you make it sound? The Omicron variant may be more transmissible, but less virulent. Most are asymptomatic. You make it sound like everyone in the ICU is there because of Omicron. Well, I'm sorry if we do, we sure don't mean to. But it is an interesting question. So let's do a little bit of quick math, shall we? Yeah, okay, I think that'll work. Check this out. Imagine if under Delta you had 10,000 people infected and you knew that 1% of those were going to go into the ICU, okay? That'd be 100 people. Well, with Omicron, it's so much easily spread a bull. What if you had 100,000 people that were infected with Omicron and still just 1% went to the ICU? Well, that would be 1,000 people. And so that's what's going on here. A lot more people are getting infected, and the virus is having an easier time finding the people who cannot withstand it. And so more people are going to the hospital and then are ending up in the ICU. So we don't mean to say that everybody in the ICU has COVID. In fact, in Bend at St. Charles Hospital, I believe the number is 7 who have COVID and are in the ICU, and they have room for, I think, 30 in their ICU. But it's worth noting, of those 7, none are fully vaccinated. All right, Donna wants to know, if this new version Omicron is more like a bad cold, what's the big deal? I've not heard of anyone dying from it. Well, excellent question, Donna. And for a lot of people who are vaccinated and boosted, it is just like a bad cold, and that's a good thing. But for people who are not vaccinated, it's a lot more than a bad cold. Now, why don't you hear of people dying from it? Because in the hospital, I asked that very question, by the way, and they don't distinguish between Delta or Omicron. They just know somebody has COVID and that they're extremely sick and then they die. So that's why you don't hear XYZ number of people died from Omicron, because the hospitals don't know, and frankly, they don't care. They're just focused on taking care of those super sick people. Okay, I hope that helps. Keep those questions coming. We appreciate it.
Gotta love the quick math. Pat Doris, thank you so much. Let's turn to another viewer question. Terry wrote, your story about COVID-positive symptomatic legacy employees caring for patients pushed me over the edge. Further compounded with the staffing shortage, now immunocompromised folks may have to have COVID-positive symptomatic people caring for them. Terry, thank you so much for reaching out. If you missed our coverage earlier this week, Terry's talking about Legacy Health's policy to let employees at their hospital who test positive for COVID come back to work after 5 days of isolation, even if they still have symptoms. Those symptoms just have to be mild enough to be controlled by over-the-counter meds. And the hospital's chief medical officer told us the staffing shortage right now is so bad, they frankly have no choice.
So if you are a pregnant person having a baby, if you're in a traumatic accident and need care, if you have cancer and are undergoing chemotherapy, we have such an issue right now between COVID taking our people out of the workforce in healthcare and a national staffing shortage. So those two things combined, we now have fewer resources to treat more people. And the question is, how are we going to do this as a nation in healthcare?
All right, so he stressed safety is the hospital's top priority, and he added staff are vaccinated, they're wearing personal protective equipment, and they're following CDC guidelines. That being said, we had a lot of people writing in with reactions similar to Terry's. They were just blown away by this. So we decided to broaden this question out, and we reached out to other local hospitals to ask them, are they also letting staff with mild COVID symptoms come back 5 days after testing positive? Again, Legacy is, but we also asked OHSU, Providence, and Kaiser Permanente. We'll go one by one. First up, OHSU. They responded quickly and they were blunt. No. A spokesperson wrote, if an OHSU workforce member tests positive for COVID-19, they must isolate for 5 days. After the 5-day isolation period, the workforce member must take a rapid antigen COVID-19 test. If the test is negative, they may return to work. If the test detects a positive case, the workforce member must remain in isolation and not return to work for a total of 10 days. So that's OHSU. Up next, Providence. Their spokesperson also got back to us really quickly with an answer basically similar to OHSU's. Caregivers, they wrote, must isolate for 5 days from first symptoms or from their first testing date if they don't have symptoms. They will then get a second test for clearance to return to work. And same story here. If that second test is positive, you will wait to return to work until day 11 after your first symptoms. So again, depends on the test. They cannot come back with those symptoms without testing. Finally, Kaiser Permanente. And unlike the last two examples, a spokesperson for Kaiser says they have gone the Legacy route. Here was their statement, quote, Kaiser Permanente is following the CDC's most recent guidelines on healthcare workers / contingency status, which say healthcare workers with asymptomatic or improving symptomatic infection can return to work 5 days after onset of symptoms, or if asymptomatic, the date of the positive test. Also, they wrote no fever for 24 hours. Okay, so here is the final count. Legacy and Kaiser are letting employees who tested positive come back to work 5 days later, even if they have mild symptoms. OHSU and Providence are not. They make employees test again, and if they're positive, they have to isolate for 5 more days. Let us know what you think of this. Email the story at kgw.com. Another question now from Bo, who wrote, will Medicare cover the cost of the new government COVID test? Great question. So starting Saturday, private health insurance companies must cover at-home COVID tests that you can get over the counter at pharmacies. And that includes about 150 million Americans with private health insurance. Unfortunately, it does not include Medicare recipients. People with Medicare Advantage might be able to get them covered, but you have to check your plan details. However, people with Medicare can get free PCR and antigen tests. Those are the kind that you take at the pharmacy or a testing site, not at home, and then you have to wait to get the results back. Now, separate from all of that, the White House is planning to make 1 billion at-home COVID tests available to households across the country starting next week. Those will be free regardless of your insurance status, even if you don't have insurance. The thing is, you will have to request the tests online. You can do that starting Wednesday at covidtests.gov. covidtests.gov on Wednesday. You can get up to 4 tests per household, but you might have to wait a bit. The White House says the tests will ship within 7 to 12 days of ordering and then might take another few days to actually arrive. Great questions from our viewers, guys. Thank you so much. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk now about memorials. We see them go up often after something tragic happens to a community. It's a good way to have a reminder of what you've lost, but frankly also what everyone there has survived. But they usually don't show you literally what you've been through, like this proposal for a sculpture in Medford. It was supposed to memorialize the victims of the Alameda fire, which killed 3 people and destroyed more than 2,600 homes in Southern Oregon back in 2020. The sculpture, called, and we're not making this up, Firestorm, would be 20 feet tall and shows human-like figures shrouded in flames. There it is again. It would have been placed in a prominent intersection in downtown Medford, and the LED flames would be seen from miles away. But if you are someone who's lost a business or a home, or worse, a loved one in a wildfire, do you really want to see giant statues of people surrounded by flames towering over your city night after night? One woman didn't think so, and she started a petition to stop the project from happening.
It is a visual and visceral reminder of trauma. It is an exposure over and over again, a repeated reminder that there was not only lives lost in the Alameda fire and structure, in addition to the structures, but it is not how you bring healing to a group of people who have experienced great loss. The way we bring healing to people is by bringing the opposite of pain, right?
So she's got a lot of people who apparently agree with her. At last check, more than 1,700 people have signed the online petition, and the city of Medford decided now to pull funding from this project. They had planned to spend $34,000 on that sculpture, but city officials say people have been coming to them with their concerns, and they decided to withdraw their support. They have asked organizers to, frankly, reevaluate the entire thing. The artist is the brother of a city employee and said he was trying to make a profound statement with that sculpture.
Firestorm is my creative intent using art that's in the public environment to make a statement, a profound sort of statement that will last for centuries.
We appreciate him talking to us. The city council now says maybe we should have gotten a little more input from the rest of the people who live here and will frankly see that sculpture every day. So they're going to create a public process to decide on a new memorial.
Let's talk trash, or rather the items that aren't trash but you're not sure how to recycle, like plastic to-go containers. A company called Ridwell used to pick those up all over the Portland metro area, but now they're no longer allowed to in parts of Washington and Clackamas counties.
Both jurisdictions have asked us to stop operating. That's disappointing from our perspective. We don't believe that we need to stop operating.
When the story continues.
Lot of questions. Whenever we have a Pat Doris Answers Your Questions segment, we get a lot more questions. So self-fulfilling prophecy, definitely. Keep sending them to the story at kgw.com or use the hashtag the story KGW on Twitter. Speak of the devil, let's get to one from Melinda. She asked, are you aware that Washington County has forced Ridwell to discontinue service in the county? There are many upset residents and posts on Nextdoor, including myself. Linda, you're absolutely right. So Ridwell, to back up a little bit, is a company that picks up those hard to recycle items from households around the Portland metro area. But they have been told to stop doing that in unincorporated Washington and Clackamas counties. And that means those items will probably now be tossed into the landfill. And thanks to your emails about this, we had Keely Chalmers look into it.
Since Ridwell launched in the Rose City last December, the company has kept more than 3 million pounds of hard-to-recycle trash out of the landfill. The company offers a curbside pickup service for materials that can't go in your normal recycling bin, but also shouldn't be in the trash. Things like plastic-to-go containers, light bulbs, or batteries.
We are a waste reduction service, and we help households make it easier to reduce the amount of material that they unnecessarily are putting into landfills every week.
The company is able to do that by partnering with businesses that can recycle those items.
You can see we have cookie containers.
We visited Ridwell's Portland headquarters back in May. Its customer base growing by the day. But these days, that base is getting smaller. Clackamas and Washington counties are no longer allowing Ridwell to pick up those items from households in unincorporated parts of the counties. So now more than 1,000 households will have to toss those plastic-to-go containers, light bulbs, or batteries in the garbage.
Both jurisdictions have asked us to stop operating. That's disappointing from our perspective. We don't believe that we need to stop operating.
That's Caleb Weaver, Ridwell's Vice President of Public Affairs. He's hopeful the counties will change their minds.
We are confident this is going to get worked out.
But the association that represents the companies that currently pick up trash and recycling thinks otherwise. It says its haulers have been long working with regulators to expand curbside recycling to include those harder to recycle items. Right now, under their current contracts, they're not allowed to. In a statement to KGW, the Oregon Refuse and Recycling Association said, quote, "The issue we should be discussing is the best way to handle these harder to recycle items so that all Oregonians can participate in a program. And the haulers have been actively working to expand curbside recycling before Ridwell tried to enter through a back door skirting regulation." Weaver says his company is more than willing to comply with local regulations and is currently in discussions with both counties to come up with a recycling resolution.
The reality is you need some creative thinking to tackle these waste challenges.
Keely Chalmers, KGW News.
Thanks for those questions, guys. That was really interesting. You should know we have the best, most brilliant producers working on the show. But when our lead producer, Stephanie, came to me earlier, she said, I'm not sure how to tease the Congressman Peter DeFazio story, but I came up with this video, and it was so perfect. We're just going to leave you with this.
They're not going to get my district. They're not getting this one.
Welcome back. Didn't you love that video before the break? Write in and tell Stephanie she did a good job. I thought that was fantastic. All right, we, have spent a lot of time recently talking about the governor's race, but let's talk now about another big election coming up this year, because for the first time since 1987, Oregon's 4th congressional district is wide open. And that's because longtime Congressman Peter DeFazio is retiring. Our own law reporter asked him about that decision this week on Straight Talk.
Let me ask you, Congressman, 2 other top Democrats and chairmen of committees have announced their plans to retire, and that, along with your announced retirement, prompted the National Republican Congressional Committee to say that committee chairs don't retire unless they know their majority is gone. True? Do you think that's going to happen? You would be in the minority if you stayed?
I think the Republicans are measuring the drapes way too early, and I love their overconfidence. I got to tell you, they're not going to get my district.
Okay, so Congressman, forgive me, but it sounds like what you're saying is...
They're not getting this one.
All right, sorry, we had to. Okay, back to that interview.
I've endorsed a candidate, experienced campaigner, experienced legislator, and Val Hoyle, our labor commissioner. and she's going to keep the district. It's better than the district I ran in, which was officially a Republican district.
That's because of redistricting,
still,
right? That made it more democratic. Was that fair to the Republicans that you represent to redistrict it so that now it's more in favor of the Democrats?
It was done, I believe, in a very fair way. The lines make sense. I had to shed a lot of people because we got a 6th congressional seat. You know, they have, right now, we're going to have 1 deep red seat, 2 deep blue seats, Bonamici and Blumenauer, and 3 seats that are competitive. So I think it's a very fair map.
All right now, a lot of Democrats are running for that seat. DeFazio mentioned he endorsed Val Hoyle, the state labor commissioner. But there's also Andrew Collock, Steve Wabel, John Selker, and G. Tommy Smith. And then Corvallis School Board Chair Sami Abdraba also just announced he is running in the Democratic primary. On the Republican side, Alex Skarlatos is running again after losing to DeFazio in 2020. He is, of course, known for helping stop an attack on a train to Paris in 2015. He's been trying to get into politics for the last several years. So again, this is a race that is definitely worth watching, and we will be watching. Keep sending in your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. We're going to finish the show next. Welcome back. You know, it's Friday, so let's do this. Let's end with a little blast from the past. This week, our reporter, Devin Haskins, was digging through our archives here at KGW. It's a big, dusty room in the building, when he came across a tape from 1984 about breakdancing in the streets of Portland. So let's go into the KGW vault now with Mark Mooney.
It's 8:32 p.m. and all is quiet in the Rose City. But wait, what's this? Teenagers in the street, their arms and feet flailing? Quick, somebody call 911.
Now, don't any of you kids watching at home try this, okay? It takes a lean, supple body and consummate gymnastic ability to perform breakdancing acrobatics. Chiropractors should use the opportunity to pass out business cards. Hard though it may be to believe, some people still are oblivious to the historic advent of breakdancing in our culture. Now, these dancers are amateurs, of course. They're the staff of Escape from New York Pizza. But these kids, who call themselves the Midnight Masters, breakdance expertly. For many of them, this kind of organized activity is all they can do to keep their nose clean.
I came up here from Los Angeles, and I started by staying out of trouble. That's how it got me out of trouble.
For 18-year-old Clark Thompson, breakdancing is a passion. You can see it by the way he uses his body like a finely tuned instrument.
Well, I just feel a lot of, rhythm. I let the music get to my head, and when it goes to my head, it just makes the rest of my body function, I guess, Yeah. But like I say, if it ain't no pain, it ain't no gain, Simple as that.
There were no incidents tonight between the Midnight Masters and the Vitamix Breakers. These kids are professionals of the pavement. Instead of exchanging blows, they'd rather exchange moves. And except for the occasional injury, breaking is good exercise and fun to watch. Perhaps one day it will be an Olympic event. With the breakdance gangs of downtown Portland, I'm Mark Mooney, News 8.
Fantastic writing. Lean, supple bodies are needed for that activity. Well, Mark Mooney was right, by the way. Breakdancing actually will make its Olympic debut as an event at the 2024 Games in Paris. So only, 40 years after that story aired. Who knew? Hey, guys, pick up your phone, follow us on Twitter at TheStoryKGW, or email thestory@kgw.com. That was so much fun. Happy Friday, and thank you for joining us on this show. The news at 6:30 with Laurel Porter starts now.